Last summer, when all my friends were back home for the break, we made it a point to party as much as we could. A few of them were moving away for good after the summer, so every night out felt like a final countdown. We were all legal drinking age by then, so our usual routine was hitting up the local bars until closing time. During one specific weekend, my parents happened to be out of town. Around 11:30 p.m., as the bars were winding down, I pitched an idea to the group. Instead of calling it a night, let's take the party back to my parents' place. Everyone was all over the idea. I gave everyone one simple rule. You can drink as much as you want, but you're crashing at my place tonight. Nobody drives home. My parents lived in a large house at the very end of a cul-de-sac. The nearest neighbors were way down the street, so noise was never an issue. Plus, they had a huge backyard pool, which was always a major selling point. I expected a decent crowd, but by midnight I was surprised by how many people had actually shown up. While making my rounds through the house, I started noticing a few faces I didn't recognize at all. I pulled one of my close friends aside and asked who these extra people were. He just gave me the classic friend of a friend response. At first, I didn't think much of it. The strangers were blended in with people I knew, chatting and having a good time. By 2 a.m., about 15 people decided to jump into the pool. I stayed on the deck, sitting with my girlfriend, just relaxing and talking. While listening to her, my eyes drifted toward the house, and I froze. Standing inside the living room, looking out the sliding glass door toward the pool, was a strange guy. He had a red Solo cup in his hand, like everyone else, but something about him felt completely off. He was clearly older than us, not an old man, but definitely well past his early 20s. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was just standing there, staring blankly at the pool. My girlfriend noticed I had zoned out and asked what was wrong. I pointed him out and asked if she knew him. She shook her head and said, "No idea, maybe Shane knows."
Right on cue, Shane walked onto the deck. I stopped him and asked about the guy in the living room. Shane didn't know him either. He said he thought the guy came in with Dustin's cousin. The problem was, Dustin and his cousin had already left about half an hour ago because neither of them was drinking. That meant this complete stranger was left alone inside my house. At that point, I decided to handle it myself. I walked into the living room, stood right in front of him and asked, "Hey man, what's your name?" He didn't answer. He just stared right through me with a blank, lifeless expression. Then he started making this low, eerie humming sound from the back of his throat. It felt like his brain had completely glitched out from a simple question. I assumed he was heavily intoxicated or on something. Since there was no way I was letting him drive or wander onto the streets in that condition, I took the red cup from his hand, guided him to the couch, and told him to sit down and sleep it off. He sat down stiffly and kept staring straight ahead at nothing. It was easily the weirdest interaction I had ever experienced. I went back out and told my girlfriend and Shane that I was going to lose it on Dustin tomorrow for leaving this creep at my house. I tried calling and texting Dustin, but he didn't answer. By 4 a.m., the party was finally dying down. Most people were passed out on couches or air mattresses. My girlfriend had gone upstairs to my room to sleep about 30 minutes earlier. I checked the living room one last time. There were about 7 people asleep on the furniture and floor, but the couch where the strange guy was sitting was empty. I asked one of my friends who was still awake if he saw where the guy went. He mentioned the guy had walked out the front door about 20 minutes ago. I was annoyed he left in that state, but deep down, I was just relieved he was out of my house. I went upstairs, crawled into bed next to my girlfriend, and fell asleep almost immediately.
You know that strange instinct you get when you're sleeping,
and you can just feel someone watching you. That feeling woke me up. It was still pitch black in the room. I sat up quickly, and right as I did, I caught a dark shadow walking out of my bedroom doorway. My immediate thought was that my girlfriend was heading to the bathroom, but when I reached down to adjust the blanket, I felt her right next to me, fast asleep. My heart dropped into my stomach. Panicked, I slipped out of bed. I tried telling myself it was just a drunk friend who wandered into the wrong room. I crept down the stairs into the pitch-black hallway. As soon as my feet hit the bottom, I heard a sound. It was a faint, metallic scraping noise, like someone rapidly digging through desk drawers. I passed the living room where my friends were still snoring. The kitchen was empty. The sound was coming from down the short hallway off the kitchen, my dad's home office. I tiptoed down the hall and hid behind a large houseplant near the doorway. I peeked inside. Standing right there, illuminated by the hallway light, was the same strange guy from earlier. He was aggressively rummaging through my father's desk drawers. His face still had that same hollow, expressionless look. Part of me wanted to confront him, but fear completely paralyzed me. Before he turned around to leave the office, I quietly backed down the hall into the living room. There was no time to run up the stairs without him seeing me. In a split-second panic, I grabbed a spare blanket off the floor next to a sleeping friend, dove onto the carpet, and pulled it over my head, pretending to be asleep. Seconds later, I heard his heavy footsteps enter the living room. Then the footsteps stopped, right beside me. He was standing directly over me. I could hear his raspy, heavy breathing. He stayed there for what felt like an eternity, probably 5 full minutes, just standing over my body in the dark. Every few seconds he would make that creepy humming sound softly under his breath. Finally, he turned and walked back toward the kitchen. I heard him slide open one last drawer. A moment later, he walked back into the living room, stomping heavily toward my direction. I tensed up, expecting the worst. Instead, he reached past me, grabbed the latch of the sliding glass patio door, opened it, walked outside into the backyard, and shut it behind him. I lay completely motionless for 15 minutes before I finally gathered the courage to get up. I locked the sliding glass door, then ran to the front door and deadbolted it as well. I immediately went to my dad's office to see what he had taken. The laptop, documents, and cash drawers all seemed untouched. Then I walked into the kitchen. I looked over at the butcher block on the counter. One of the largest, sharpest chef's knives from my dad's set was missing. I searched the entire kitchen, the trash cans, the counters. It was gone. I didn't sleep a single second for the rest of that night. The next morning, I confronted everyone. Nobody knew who he was. When I finally got hold of Dustin, he gave me an answer that made my blood run cold. Dustin said the guy started following him and his cousin on the street while they were walking to my house. They didn't know him at all. He kept tailing them silently, acting so creepy that they panicked and left the party early without telling anyone. Thankfully, I never saw that man again. To this day, I have no idea who he was or what his intentions were. But whenever I look back on that night, one thought haunts me more than anything else. When he was in my bedroom while I was asleep, what was he looking for? And why did he leave with that knife?
The next story. A few years back, one of my best friends, Riley, worked in our town as a location manager for film productions. Basically, his job was scouting local spots for directors looking to shoot movies on a budget. At the time, our small town was trying to entice indie filmmakers to shoot locally. An up-and-coming director came to town to produce a horror film, mostly because the area looked like something straight out of a Stephen King novel. While showing him around, Riley took the director to a notorious abandoned house on the edge of town. According to local law, the place was supposed to be haunted or cursed. Nobody actually believed the urban legends, but it was our town's favorite campfire story. The moment the director saw the property, he became completely obsessed with it. He insisted on shooting several key scenes inside the house. Riley wasn't much of a skeptic, so he was a little uneasy about securing the location. But not wanting to let the director down, he tracked down the property owner the following day. Riley described the owner as a creepy, unkempt old guy who smelled foul and gave off an immediate bad vibe. Riley expected a fight over getting permission, but surprisingly, the guy handed over access with zero hesitation. That evening, a few crew members invited Riley out to celebrate locking down the final location. Riley didn't want to go alone, so he dragged me along. We were hopping from bar to bar, having a good time. There was a woman in our group named Jade who was working on the film production. As the night went on, we started hitting it off. Around 1 a.m., Jade had a wild idea. She suggested the 6 of us head over to the haunted house right then to check it out. Riley shot it down immediately, but wanting to impress Jade, I took her side and convinced the rest of the group to go along with it. Reluctantly, Riley caved and joined us.
When we pulled up to the property, the entire street was pitch black and dead silent. We walked up to the front entrance, and to our surprise, the front door was completely unlocked. The 6 of us stepped inside quietly. The air inside was freezing, noticeably colder than the night air outside. Riley immediately started complaining of a foul, decaying odor, though none of the rest of us could smell it yet. We stood in the main entryway, using our phone flashlights to cut through the dark. Then we heard it. Coming from the floor directly above us was the distinct sound of footsteps. It wasn't the sound of an old wooden house settling. It was the clear, rhythmic patter of someone walking back and forth across the room. We all froze. Panicked by the sound, Riley and the other 3 guys backed out of the house immediately. Jade, however, refused to leave without looking around. I couldn't let her go up there alone, so I followed her toward the staircase at the back of the house. Right next to the stairs, I noticed a heavy wooden door. I tried the handle. It was locked tight. I found it strange that a side door inside an abandoned house was locked, while the front door was open wide. We tiptoed upstairs. The moment we reached the 2nd floor, the footsteps stopped completely. It was dead silent. We checked every single room on the upper level. Nothing. The entire floor was completely empty, even though we had both heard someone walking around just moments before. Freaked out, we headed back downstairs. Jade made a nervous joke about being disappointed we didn't see a ghost. But as we reached the bottom of the stairs, my stomach dropped. The side door right next to the staircase, the one I had tried myself just 5 minutes prior, was now wide open. It led down into a pitch-black basement.
Jade looked terrified for the first time all night, but convinced someone was playing a practical joke on us, I ignored her warnings and stepped down into the basement alone. It was bone-chillingly cold down there, and the air reeked of raw sewage and rot.
My phone flashlight was barely making a dent in the heavy darkness. As I swept the beam across the room, I caught a sudden flash of movement near a pile of cardboard boxes. I took a few cautious steps forward, assuming it might be a squatter or homeless person hiding in the dark. Suddenly, a dark silhouette rose from behind the boxes and bolted across the room right in front of me. It moved so fast I felt the rush of air hit my face. I couldn't make out any facial features in the dark, just a fast, looming shadow. Adrenaline surged through me. I backed up towards the stairs, raised my voice and said, "Look, I'm leaving. Sorry for intruding." I turned to run, and right behind me, from the deepest corner of the pitch-black basement, a raspy voice whispered, "Don't leave just yet." Jade was standing at the top of the stairs and heard the whisper too. She shrieked in terror. We sprinted out of the house, piled into the car, and sped away from the property. The next morning, Riley called the director and pulled the plug on using the location, citing safety hazards inside the structure. When he notified the property owner, the old man simply nodded, thanked him, and walked away without asking a single question. A few months later, the entire movie project was scrapped due to funding issues. To this day, whenever I think back to that night, I get chills. Was it an elaborate prank by a trespasser, or was there something far more sinister waiting in that basement? I don't have the answer, and I'm perfectly fine never going back to find out.
Jade looked terrified for the first time all night. But convinced someone was playing a practical joke on us, I ignored her warnings and stepped down into the basement alone. It was bone-chillingly cold down there, and the air reeked of raw sewage and rot. My phone flashlight was barely making a dent in the heavy darkness. As I swept the beam across the room, I caught a sudden flash of movement near a pile of cardboard boxes. I took a few cautious steps forward, assuming it might be a squatter or a homeless person hiding in the dark. Suddenly, a dark silhouette rose from behind the boxes and bolted across the room right in front of me. It moved so fast I felt the rush of air hit my face. I couldn't make out any facial features in the dark, just a fast, looming shadow. Adrenaline surged through me. I backed up towards the stairs, raised my voice and said, "Look, I'm leaving. Sorry for intruding." I turned to run, and right behind me, from the deepest corner of the pitch-black basement, a raspy voice whispered, "Don't leave just yet." Jade was standing at the top of the stairs and heard the whisper too. She shrieked in terror. We sprinted out of the house, piled into the car, and sped away from the property. The next morning, Riley pulled the plug on using the location, citing safety hazards inside the structure. When he notified the property owner, the old man simply nodded, thanked him, and walked away without asking a single question. A few months later, the entire movie project was scrapped due to funding issues. To this day, whenever I think back to that night, I get chills. Was it an elaborate prank by a trespasser, or was there something far more sinister waiting in that basement? I don't have the answer, and I'm perfectly fine never going back to find out.
The next story. Some people in this world are just completely out of their minds. I never truly realized how unhinged a person could be until I had a terrifying encounter one night that I will never, ever forget. A few years back, one of my best friends was getting married. His best man went all out and paid for the entire groomsmen group to travel to Cape Cod for the bachelor party. Usually, I'd be annoyed about spending money traveling for a party, but I wasn't about to complain about a free trip with the boys. The trip was scheduled for 3 nights. We spent our days relaxing on the beach and our nights checking out the local bars. We especially loved this one spot located right on the water. On our first night out, I met a local girl named Brittany. We hit it off right away and texted each other all through the next day. On the second night, my friends wanted to try a different bar, but I decided to stay at the waterfront spot from the night before, just to hang out with Brittany. We spent a couple of hours drinking, talking, and catching up. Once we had a good buzz going, she asked if I wanted to take a walk along the beach. I thought it would be a great way for us to get some privacy, so without hesitation, I agreed. We walked for a while. For the first stretch, we were walking along what seemed to be a private beach, backed by a row of large oceanfront homes. Brittany assured me it was fine to walk there, so we kept going. Eventually, we walked far enough that the houses vanished. The sandy shoreline turned into a rocky, uneven stretch of coast. It was pitch black, making it pretty tough to see where we were stepping. I didn't care about the dark. All I cared about was that we were finally completely alone. I was mentally preparing to make a move when I noticed Brittany stop in her tracks, staring off into the distance with a weird look on her face. I asked her what she was looking at. She pointed toward a rock cluster about 20 feet ahead of us and asked in a confused voice, "Can you see that guy standing over there?" I squinted into the dark, trying to focus, but I didn't see anything except black shapes. I asked her where she was looking, and she doubled down, pointing harder. She kept insisting someone was standing there, visibly annoyed that I couldn't see it. I finally spotted what she was looking at, but I told her it was just a rock, hoping to get her attention back on me. She couldn't let it go, though. She stepped closer to the rocks to prove to me it was a person. Just as I started to tell her again that it was clearly a rock, the figure moved.
I froze, caught her arm and admitted she was right. We were only about 10 feet away now. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I could clearly see a man partially kneeling on top of a rock. He was wearing a worn-out, maroon-colored baseball hat. He was completely silent, just staring directly at us. I felt like an idiot for getting us that close. I leaned over to Brittany and whispered that we needed to turn around right now. She agreed. We turned back and started walking away as quietly as possible. After a few minutes, I glanced over my shoulder and noticed the man was following us. He was keeping his distance, but it was definitely him. I could see the maroon hat in the moonlight. Brittany started getting nervous. I tried to reassure her, saying he was probably just walking in the same direction, but she shot that down immediately, telling me random people don't just wander this specific deserted stretch of beach at 3 a.m. I looked back again, and my heart dropped. The guy was closing the gap, moving toward us with a fast, aggressive stride. "Run!" I told her. We broke into a sprint. When I turned around, the man in the maroon hat was sprinting right behind us. There was no denying it. He was hunting us down. We finally reached the part of the beach lined with houses. I grabbed Brittany's hand, cut through a backyard, and jumped a low fence. Instead of running down the open street where he could easily spot us, we dove onto the driveway of one of the houses and shimmied underneath a parked Jeep. Brittany pressed her hands tightly over her mouth to muffle her breathing. I was trying my absolute best to keep my composure, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. I prayed he would just run past the driveway onto the beach. That hope vanished instantly. A second later, I heard footsteps on the gravel. Through the gap underneath the Jeep, I saw a pair of bare feet walk up the driveway. They were filthy, covered in mud and caked in dried blood. They stopped less than 2 feet from my head. The man wasn't running anymore. He was standing completely still, almost like he knew exactly where we were hiding. Then came the stranger, more terrifying part. As he stood there, he started making this weird rhythmic clicking sound with his tongue against the roof of his mouth. Click, click, click. In his right hand, hanging down by his leg, was a long metallic object swinging back and forth. In the dim light, I saw the reflection off the metal. I swear to you, the man was holding a massive machete.
He stood beside that jeep for what felt like an eternity, clicking his tongue softly while holding that weapon. Finally, he turned and slowly walked away down the street. We stayed completely frozen under that vehicle for a full 15 minutes before I gestured to Brittany that it was safe to crawl out. We ran all the way back along the beach until we reached the bar where we started. We immediately called an Uber and headed back to the Airbnb where my friends were staying. When we told the guys what happened, they were completely creeped out. Brittany and I couldn't stop shaking for the rest of the night. Thankfully, we made it out of that situation physically unharmed, but to this day, I have no idea who that man was or what he was doing out on that beach with a blood-stained blade. I just hope he's not still out there terrorizing people in the dark.